How's everybody doing tonight? Good. This is not my first beer school, believe it or not. I'm a two-timer. Pretty excited about that. I was working for Boulevard Brewing Company in a previous life and did a beer school here. Recognized some familiar beards and faces. And so anyways, yeah, glad to be back. I'm actually working for my alma mater in the beer world. So I started in the beer business about 6-7 years ago. And the first brewery I ever worked for was TwoBrothers Brewing Company while I was living in Chicago. I was, eager to do anything that involved beer, and they paid me next to nothing and gave me some business cards and said, "Go get them, Tiger." And I was their first sales rep, and kind of hit the pavement in the harsh, mean streets of Chicago trying to sell beer. And did that for about 3 years, and eventually made my way back to home for me, which is Kansas City, and worked for Boulevard for a number of years. Now I'm kind of back doing this this Two Brothers thing as we launch a bunch of new Midwestern markets, Missouri being the first. So I'm super stoked to be back with my first beer family. It's pretty exciting. So that's a little bit about me. I'll start probably the same way I started the last one I did, which is just thanking you guys. You kind of vote with your dollars and vote with your time and your interest. You could have done any number of things tonight. You could have gone to a chain restaurant and bought a Bud Light. You could have done anything like that. But instead you're voting and with your dollars, and you're doing the right thing. Congratulations. You're coming into a community of like-minded, cool, you all look like beautiful people to talk about something that you're passionate about or you have an interest in, which is beer, which is cool. And not just beer, but good beer. Beer that's brewed by independent, locally owned companies, family-run, employing multiple people from your community or other local communities. So I think that's pretty killer. So I applaud you. Thank you very much for being here. And I guess in general, that's really what got me into beer in the first place, is just that idea that I knew from an early point that I was going to drink beer for the rest of my life. I knew that was something I was going to do. It's just going to happen. And so why not take a vested interest in where said beer comes from, And I think a lot more of us are doing that with lots of things in our lives, food and beer and I don't know, clothing, whatever, you name it. You name it. And I think it's kind of a neat thing that you can mix in almost what I would consider just civic involvement and beer. Because beer makes you feel funny and good, after a couple, and civic involvement should make you feel good, but the two hand in hand are definitely going to make you feel good. So it's a neat thing. I will say that the beer community that you guys have built, are continuing to build here in St. Louis, is really admirable. This is coming from a Kansas Cityan as well, I'll say that. You guys have a really, really great thing going here with lots of really, really great locally made beer. I'm friends with a lot of the guys that are making that beer, and I think you're doing awesome things, something that us in Kansas City are hoping to see our home city get even better at, more involved in. So keep that up. So with all that, I guess I'll kind of get into the actual Two Brothers thing. Two Brothers Brewing Company is based in Warrenville, Illinois. That's a Chicago suburb. There's about, 1 billion of them. So Warrenville lies just, 20 miles, 15 miles to the west of Chicago proper, where the land is cheaper and it makes sense to build a brewery there. And Two Brothers was started up, not surprisingly, by... You got it. Nailed it. You all get some beer here in a second. Two Brothers Brewing Company was started by two guys, Jim and Jason Abel. That's E-B-E-L. That's their last name. And two Chicago natives. And their story is the story of, I think, a lot of brewery startups in the mid-'90s. We got up and running in 1996. Sold our first kegs in 1997. But the stories are relatively similar. You've got, guys that graduate from college, eventually do some post-college European travels, travel around, hoof it around Europe, and in the mid-'90s fall in love with all this amazing beer they taste in Europe that they've never had the opportunity to experience in the United States. And they come back to the United States and they, kind of take a survey of the scene and see, what sort of beer is available, and are kind of disheartened by those options, and so they start to make it themselves. And I think the U.S. home brewer movement, really took hold pretty solidly in the mid '90s as people started to figure out that you could also maybe build a business around building a small brewery in the United States, which still in the mid '90s was still kind of a bonkers idea, which is crazy. And look how far we've come. So Jim and Jason both, at some point after college, traveled through Europe. Jason, the younger brother, spent a lot of time around kind of northern French area, that borders on Belgium, and really got a lot of really cool influence on the beer scene up there. They traveled through Germany, so they brought with them, kind of that classic old world Belgian, German, English, and even French perspective on beer culture, beer community, and also food. Really, they fell in love with like actual bread and brie that hasn't been cooked to the point of cooking out all the flavor, and so all the old world stuff in the food world that kind of accompanies beer. These are all the same things that we're now paralleling to in the United States. We're enjoying this renaissance of like great food and great beer. It's all this cool thing, and so the Abels kind of witnessed that in Europe in the early '90s, and came back to the Chicagoland area, and decided they'd just start making beer themselves as they finished up their collegiate life. And one of them pursued life as an architect. One of them pursued life as a lawyer. And so in the meantime, they did the home brewing thing, and they got to the point where they figured they were seeking out home brewing ingredients enough that they would open up a home brew shop. And so the home brewing shop was really the first of its kind in their general area, and that's really what kind of spearheaded the brewery and where we are today. So like 92-ish, they open up a home brew shop called the Brewing Coop, and they're off and running. They kind of, from that point on, all they're talking about is beer. That's it, beer, 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 beer. And, it takes about 4 years of just talking beer, 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 beer at family functions and with friends and stuff like that, that their friends and family finally tell them, like, if you don't open up a brewery, you got to stop talking about beer because we're sick of hearing about it. And so in 96, they broke... They didn't break ground. They opened up the first brewery. They're brewing on a little 15-barrel brew house, and thank you. And from there, they're off and running. And they actually solicited some dairy tanks from their grandfather's farm. This also isn't a unique story with home brewery startups. They sanctioned some dairy tanks from their grandfather's farm and retrofit them into fermentation tanks. That's pretty common of a lot of brewery startups. And with some money and these tanks kind of held together with spit and chewing gum, they're off and running. And jump ahead, how many years is it? 19 years? 18 years? 19 years? And we're brewing about 50,000 barrels of beer a year. We're kind of a mainstay in the Chicago market and growing at a nice little clip that we feel comfortable with as a small family-owned brewery, enough to where we're super stoked to be opening up neighboring states like Missouri and starting to sell some beer down here to people that are always looking for something new and something different. And we figure 4-ish hours is a pretty easy spell for us to sell our beer. We want to sell you as fresh a beer as we can. That's witnessed tonight by beer that was brewed, as fresh as you could possibly have it because you're the first people to drink it in the state. And so, St. Louis and Missouri in general makes a whole lot of sense. That's Two Brothers in a nutshell. Since we've got beers in our hands, let's start drinking them. The first beer we're going to start off with is a beer called Sidekick. Sidekick's newish beer for us. We've been brewing it for about 2.5 years. And I should also mention that this is, feel free to, I'll open up for discussion a little bit here and there, or whenever you want. But, if I say that this is Sidekick, this is what we call an extra pale ale, and you say, that's horseshit. You just called it that because everybody's making a session IPA. then you could go ahead and call me out on it, and I'd be okay with it. We could have a discourse about that. So this is Sidekick. It's our extra pale ale, and we started brewing about 2.5 years ago, and I think that was at the brink or the midst of probably session IPA becoming a thing that every brewery in the United States makes, and we call it an extra pale ale because we call it an extra pale ale. But it's, obviously following those same general goals of the overarching style, which is give people what they want, which is a massive, big hop aroma, and then also make it maybe a little bit more amicable to new entrants in craft beer, and make it not quite so, mind-blowingly bitter and hoppy on the palate, and maybe also make it a little lower in alcohol as a byproduct of those two things, so that you can enjoy a few of them, and maybe also taste your food a little bit better after you've had 4 of them, and all these things, So, 2.5 years ago, we weren't at the forefront by any means of the concept of that style of beer, but we thought it made a lot of sense, and so we started making this, and really it's been going gangbusters in Chicago and other areas we're in, and so that's Sidekick. It's like I said, like any beer of that variety, it's going to be crazy dry hopped. Obviously, the dry hopping gives it that big hoppy, citrusy, tropical fruit aroma, and that's no different in this. It's about 1 pound per barrel dry hopping, which is pretty healthy amount, especially for like a brewery our size. That's a lot of hops just for dry hopping, hops that you just toss into the liquid, right? They sit there as the beer's done, kind of post-fermentation, and just like tea, infuse the beer with aroma, and then you ditch them. You don't even care about the bittering qualities that you could get out of them, because all you're looking for is aroma. And for the dry hopping regimen on this beer, we predominantly use, we only use 2 hops. We use Galaxy hops. I remember that there's questions, right? There's questions, so you're writing, yeah. I'll remember some of these things. There's Galaxy hops. Galaxy's a cool hop out of New Zealand that carries with it tons of big, kind of tropical fruit aromatics. It's often used, if a small brewery can't get Cicero hops, which are like hot shit these days. Cicero hops, tough to get. You'll use Galaxy because they afford a lot of the same sort of big, grassy, citrusy aromatics. So that's a New Zealand hop we use, and then we use El Dorado hops as well, which is kind of a newer American hop varietal that is really taking the world by storm. It's kind of a dual hop. It works equally well with both aromatic hopping, using them later on in the brewing process or in dry hopping, but also provides a lot of really, really nice bitterness and flavor if used up front in the boil. So those are the 2 big hops we use for this, and I think you get that big tropical fruit nose out of it. Obviously, again, with the style, you're gonna, as far as the malt bill goes, you're going to see a lot more base malt or Pilsner malt or lighter malt, and we use, almost 90%, I think, base malt for the beer. So enough to give the beer some body and not make it just what I think sometimes referred to as a hop soda pop. You're not just looking for just hop soda necessarily. You want you want to know you're drinking a beer. You don't want to have 30 of them and be like, where's my beer? You want to, eat 6 of them and be like, all right, I'm good. So that's where the malt bill really comes into play. So a lot of base malt, but then, we'll throw in a little bit of, I think it's a little bit of Simpson 10, a little bit of malt to give it just a little bit of body to knock it up to that point where it's not that hop soda water that you're typically or that you can fall into. So that's Sidekick. What's everybody think about it? Pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of tasting it right now, and to be honest, it might be a little oxidized, might be a little old. That's what I'm getting out of it, which is a possibility. Just entered the state, so that might be what you're picking up on, a smidge, maybe not. Thank you. But yeah, no, just traditional, house yeast strain, ale yeast, and the fruit you should be getting out of it is predominantly from the use of the hops. in general, like I said, like it's become trendy to make a session IPA. Breweries that said they would never ever make a session IPA are making a session IPA because it's just the way it's going. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think personally, it makes a lot of sense. Again, it's given us everything we want out of IPAs. Now that as Americans, we've warmed up to the idea of that aroma in beer, and even maybe a little bit of that bitterness in beer. As a overall consumer, it makes tons of sense to make that beer even more palatable and regularly consumable. So I think the session IPA, it's not a trend. I don't know. To me, I think it makes a lot of sense. I drink a ton of them. So I think it's kind of nice. And I think most people, I think Founders and Stone and Scott just came out with one, and I think Oscar Blues is coming out with one coming up here soon. They're all killer. I think everybody's making really good versions of it, and I think ours fits in there really nicely as well. That's Sidekick. Let me see if I had any notes that I didn't talk about with Sidekick. I do not. That's about it. Does everybody have Domaine Dupage? Awesome. Am I going too fast? I think we're good. All right, so this is an oldie but a goodie. All the other beers we're going to have tonight, Sidekick included, were beers that the brewery didn't make when I worked for them originally for the first 3 years. So we kind of, we've done what a lot of brewers are doing. We're growing up with the times. I mean, you're a mid-90s opening up startup brewery, 15 years in or whatnot, you're going to have to kind of reevaluate and see where people's palates are. And, people want a session IPA, people want a big West Coast IPA, they want, all these things. So we've grown up with the times. This is a beer that's kind of been tried and true for us. So again, it's called Domaine Dupage. People get really French with the pronunciation. The brewery's settled in beautiful DuPage County, Illinois. That's the name. So you hear a lot of Domaine Dupage, and you hear people get kind of fancy with it. And it's it has fancy, or it actually doesn't even have fancy origins, but it has French origins. So I was talking about Jason Abel and Jim, his brother. The two of them spent time in Europe, and at some point both of them found themselves, like I said, along that northern French border that borders Belgium, and really kind of fell in love with certain areas up there. And there's the whole Brabant region of both kind of Flanders and crosses over into France a little bit. And they found themselves in small villages in that neck of the woods that were making these Brabant-style ales. They were essentially like a bière de garde, but a French bière de garde. I don't know. When you think of bière de garde, you think big, fruity, ester Belgian bière de gardes. That's what I think about typically. But you swing to kind of lower Belgium, northern France, and the styles tend to be much more like malt driven. That's kind of the way they are, and they're kind of like table beers to a certain degree. You think about like a Belgian single, you think about like low alcohol, food friendly, beer of the people, on every table for every meal sort of beers. And that's kind of the style of beer that we're trying to mimic here. So the brothers kind of fell in love with this, and they noticed, every town they went to kind of had a different variant beer that was, brewed locally or brewed nearby. Excuse me. And so that was something that kind of stuck in their craw as something they want to, brew later on down the line. And so Domaine Dupage has become, our flagship beer by far. It's our best-selling beer. It's our probably our most highly awarded beer. Not that matters, but I got to say it. It's won some medals at GABF and otherwise. And so something we're really, really proud of, and still I think as a company probably drink a lot of predominantly. So I think the general things that you're going to note out of it, again, is pretty malt driven, right? You get a lot of caramel malt. There's a good amount of Munich malt in it. It's going to be pretty dry on the finish. It's kind of just, again, it's not a Belgian yeast strain or anything like that. You're not getting like big fruity esters out of it or anything like that. It's kind of dry, almost like a smidge of sulfur maybe at the end. And then that caramel kind of lingers a little bit, continues to linger. Hop profile on this obviously is much more kind of old world hop. I think they're both, let me pull up some notes real quick. They're both U.S. hops. Yeah, it's Northern Brewer and Mount Hood. Northern Brewer, both U.S. hops that have essentially taken like old world hops, Fuggles, and I think East Kent Golding, and then kind of made them into your, American grown hops that have that same kind of more earthy, or aromatics to them, not overtly bitter. You don't get any of that pine or citrus that you got out of, the first beer or the next two beers that we'll have. So the hops are really just meant to kind of do that, cleansing cut of all that sweetness that you get in the beer. I think, again, we talk about food, and, like the brothers themselves are super food kind of focused people. Chicago's a great food town right now, great culinary town. St. Louis in its own right is a great culinary town. And so it's fun to start to play around with, small independent breweries and small independent restaurants and marry those two worlds together. And we're doing that a ton up in Chicago, and I think we'll start to do a lot more of it as a brewery here in the St. Louis area and over in Kansas City. And so, I mean, the obvious is always that, like, I'm not going to discount like the entire history of man that we have with drinking wine with food, but I think beer has it beat. I'll just say that right off the bat. I like wine with food. Don't get me wrong, but like, yes, please, thank you, God. Beautiful, yes. Okay, so pairings for this specific beer, I think we're looking at two things specifically. One, we're looking for that caramel profile that you get out of malt, right? Malt in beer, the reason that beer has that color is that malt, that grain has been caramelized, roasted, post-malting into this kind of nice caramelly sort of thing. You drink a beer, you drink a stout, and that grain has obviously been roasted to the point of charring it like a coffee bean. You get those roasty qualities. In this particular instance, we get caramel, and caramel is one of those overarching flavors in food. You think about, you have yourself a steak or a protein or even vegetables that have been charred. You get that. I'm going to go all America's Test Kitchen Cooks Country on you. Like, you get that Maillard reaction, that caramelization on the outside. That's what makes that stuff taste really good. And beer has this interesting component of being able to nicely match with that, and I'm not saying that wine doesn't have that ability either, but like beer, like the liquid it is, which is like this, humble beer of the humble liquid of the people, alcohol of the people, is just so much easier across the board. You have this with varying things from salmon to a steak to to oyster polvo. Yeah, there we go. And it's gonna work really nicely. Wine, I think you have your home runs. Like, you're like life will never be the same. I've had Sauterne and blah blah blah. But beer works, man. It works with food. It's like for a reason. The other big thing with it is always carbonation. Like bubbles are good. They're good. They clean off your palate and they get you ready for your next bite of food. And if you're having a fatty dish or a comforting, homey-like dish, you're having some short ribs, you're having some pork belly or whatnot, you want those bubbles to scrub your food off and get you ready to do it again. And wine, there's certain wines that have that ability, but beer across the board has the ability to do it. They got bubbles in pretty much all of it, with the exception of cask stuff or whatever. And so that's another, plus on the food column for beer. And I think this style of beer in particular really kind of nails it. So I think that's always the thing. That's always the game we're playing with beer, with craft beer these days. Obviously, is like, we want to elevate beer. We want to talk about beer, as a not a commodity product that you go to the store and you buy your cans of beer, you drink them, you throw them away, and it's just like you go get, any general commodity you get. You want to talk about beer with some reverence, it's stuff took a long time. It's got a lot of history, a lot of background in it. But we also don't want to be so like highbrow that we become off-putting, because that's not what beer is. I'm sure, I don't think that's what wine is either, but I think wine has that persona, right? That stereotype that like you walk into a restaurant and you look at a wine list and like that, you get yourself either maybe priced out of a certain price point you want to check out, or you just don't get what the heck's going on. And beer is meant to be, much more accessible again. And the other nice part about it is that price point thing becomes really, really attractive as well. I think, you want to get a glass or a bottle of the finest example of, something from Burgundy. I would have to take out a loan to get that bottle, but you want the best possible example of a double IPA brewed in the United States, and you can get that bottle for, thank you, upwards of maybe $20 if you had to buy it, online or something like that. That's really fucking cool. Like you can get the best example of this thing that's made for a price point that's, approachable to everybody. And I think that's one of those things that makes beer and craft beer and this craft beer movement that we're going through so cool. So, please. So yeah, so this style is in the Belgian. It's won 3 times in the Belgian and French style categories, which are great categories and filled with. You talk about like serious beers. Beers that aren't available even in Missouri. You talk about like the Allagashes of the world and the Lost Abbeys of the world, and breweries are making the brewery. People are making amazing Belgian beers, and this is we've hovered in that bronze category for 3 years. I think 2008, 2010, and 2012. So it's cool too that you can take awards with a grain of salt too. Right? And it's kind of a crapshoot. But I think if you've won the same category, or you've placed in the same category for a couple of years. I think that says something about just, at the very least, the consistency of the beer. I think it's also cool that, in that style, there's big, in-your-face Belgian doubles, Belgian quads. There's all kinds of, big things. And that kind of a humble, again, like beer of the people, French bière de garde could kind of cut through all of that and be like, this is really drinkable and delicious and complex in a lower ABV, lower in-your-face sort of way. It's kind of something we find humbling and cool. That's a good question. All right, I think we're on to our third beer. So this is a brand new beer. So this is one of those beers where you are the first people in the state of Missouri to be drinking it. So cheers to you. I should also mention I'm on my 13th day on the job. I just started at the beginning of the year. But again, it's a company I knew really well, but I've just started this new Midwestern roll or whatnot. So when I said these are beers that are new to me, like I literally hadn't had this beer until earlier tonight, and I was proud to smell it and be like, okay, good, this is good. I think it's really, really good. So this is Wobble. This is Wobble IPA. So again, I think our brewery is kind of, to a certain degree, it's a little bit, it's a byproduct. Again, I look at brewery startups in the mid '90s. Right, and I think like these are breweries that knew they had to have like an amber ale and a pale ale and an IPA, and you kind of had your pretty, at that time that was, you were getting crazy by even opening up a brewery, so you kind of had your mainstays. You had a stout, you had a porter, you had all these things, and I think our brewery's MO was always kind of taking styles and giving them a little bit of a twist, but we were a brewery of the time, and we were always kind of focused on pretty balanced beer. We weren't going crazy one direction or the other. I think we've always kind of maintained that, despite the fact that we do big double IPAs and we do big 10+% alcohol beers and sour beers and barrel aged beers and stuff like that. But Wobble kind of for us was the first really kind of like big West Coast style in your face IPA that we brewed. And we just started brewing it late last year, late 2014. So it's a relatively new beer for us, and it's really kind of taken off. And for us, the Wobble name is pretty obvious as to what it is. We always talk about balance in our beer and just making beers that don't sway too much either way. And the Weeble Wobble thing came up in a meeting, and Weeble Wobbles wobble, but they don't do. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Write that down. That's a question. It's going to be a question. Weebles wobble, but they don't do this. Remember that. So yeah, hence the name. I think we actually are gonna have like a glass. You guys seen those like Scotch glasses that like wobble around? We'll probably do one of those. Got it too. The name's Wobble. So anyways, but it's been, I think just like a breath of fresh air for us as a brewery, and it's there's lots of people making really great like big aromatic and well hopped IPAs obviously in this country. That's a big, continues to be the fastest growing segment of beer. But it was kind of time that we did one that we really wanted to drink and felt proud of, and so that's what we're looking at here. It's essentially a 4-hop beer, all 4 hops used in both the boil and then used in the dry hopping regimen. So that kind of makes it nice and easy on us. I mean, it's a lot of hops for dry hopping regimen to a certain degree, but it's obviously not a ton for actual brewing capacity and brewing application. But it just kind of makes it nice and easy for us to know the 4 that we're going to deal with. Simcoe, Centennial, Citra, and Chinook, all pretty well-known hops. This beer is pretty darn fresh. I think it's tasting pretty good. What do you guys think? If you're going to buy an IPA, you give this a whirl every now and then, I hope. I mean, that's kind of, again, that style, that sector of beer is massive, and I go off the reservation often and drink all kinds of IPA. But our hope is that this one has a place in that big, crazy world. I think for most people anymore, to a certain degree, I think we're getting more savvy as consumers about like freshness in IPAs, right? I mean, I think Stone's helped do that a lot with their like Enjoy By series or whatnot. But like the secret, the no longer secret is that like you want the freshest possible IPA you can find, because that hop profile doesn't get better with age, right? At all. Like the day it leaves the brewery, it's declining. It's declining gently if you're doing it the right way, which I think we are. But again, I think that's a big thing for people that are looking for kind of more hop-forward beers these days. And that's another reason why Missouri for us makes a lot of sense. I mean, anytime, obviously, as a brewery, you let beer leave your warehouse, your docks. It's like your child's going off to college thing. I've never experienced that, but I'm sure that's what it feels like. And you want to, you're worried about it. You want to make sure it's treated nicely, and in the sense of this beer, it'll be like, I want to make sure this beer is drank as fast as is humanly possible. And for us, 4 hours from the brewery is a nice, gentle college trip. We feel pretty okay with that. We feel all right sending him off to college and saying like, go get him, Tiger. And we feel like the beer's not gonna, especially this beer that's meant to be drank so fresh, isn't gonna sit on that shelf for a long period of time. So it's Wobble. It's our newest one. Trying to think of a couple other things. Also predominantly base malt, like again, I think you say West Coast style IPA. IPA is obviously kind of, we're born on the West Coast. I can think of, one with a green label on it, Sierra Nevada, that kind of started the whole thing. And, any more like West Coast IPAs, I think, tend to say a little bit more like, brazenly hop forward. So malt, you need to be there to provide alcohol and a little bit of backbone, but otherwise get the hell out of the way, because it's all about hops. And I can think of all kinds of great West Coast IPAs that fall into that category, and that's definitely what the overall style that we were kind of going for here. So malt profile is predominantly just kind of base malt, a little bit of Pilsner malt, but it's it's meant to let the hops do their thing. I think that's really good. I think that's delicious. I'm gonna drink more of that. Yes. Bitterness is, I think it's 69, 70 IBUs, 6.9%. So again, it kind of falls under, I think that's like a rough BJCP guideline for a straight up day-to-day West Coast IPA. Like I think you want to take Stone as a benchmark on IPAs. I think that's about what Stone is. You want to take Lagunitas, it's about the same, And so, yeah, pretty much spot on there. 80 IBUs, 7 ABV. Any other questions? Any thoughts, comments, concerns, questions with our conversation so far? Yeah. Good question. So yeah, we've got the breweries, the home base, the mothership is based in Warrenville, Illinois. We recently, in the Chicagoland area, we bought an old historic roundhouse. Roundhouses, right, where trains used to go in, get spun around, and see a lot of people older than me shaking their heads, and a lot of people my age not shaking their heads. But that's what roundhouses were. And so we bought that. We kind of morphed that into a restaurant. We actually have a roastery in that building. We've got a bakery. Kind of taken like that, almost like that Zingerman's model for anybody that knows Zingerman's up in Ann Arbor, where you find something you really love and you build upon each thing, you know, and it's kind of, thank you very much. And it's kind of a cool thing we have going on now, you know, we've got all these interests, and now the brewery's doing well enough that we can kind of support those interests with other interests, and so we're kind of doing all kinds of fun stuff. I say all of that, and also this week we are opening up a small satellite brew pub in Arizona, which is just where the brothers themselves have some family and historical ties to, and that's a market that we felt we could enter into. Yeah?
Where in Arizona might be out there?
It's in the Scottsdale area, I believe. Yeah. So we're super excited about that. I think they're opening like tonight. That's the reason I'm not there. I gave up Arizona so I could come here and hang out with you guys. You mean that much to me. No, yeah, but yeah, the Arizona location is going to be super fun. It's cool. That's just a neat area whose craft beer scene is also kind of, you know, taking off and doing different things. All right, that's Wobble. But not fall down. Not till the second session, anyways. I don't think I ever actually watched myself on this first one. When I did it with Boulevard, I don't think I ever watched it. I don't think I'll probably watch this one either. You guys, yeah. Has anybody ever talked for an hour and then watched themselves talk for an hour? Friggin' scary. It's all get out. Okay, so we're on to our last beer, and this is another one that, you know, again, for me, actually for the brewery itself is a new brewery. Something we brewed in 2013 for the first time. It's a seasonal beer. This is I guess the one seasonal beer we're having tonight. All the others are year-round beers that'll be available in your neck of the woods. This is called Reverlry Imperial Red. It's a pretty big beer. For us especially, it's a really big beer. This kind of coincided with us, you know, I don't know, like getting a new bottling line, kind of adding a whirlpool onto our brew house, and doing a lot of kind of, you know, the general expansion you have to do with a small brewery. We're brewing on a 50-barrel system right now, and we've kind of just done some upgrades over the years. And so that's kind of necessary to make a beer of this magnitude and not completely destroy your brew house or your brewery. Because this beer, you know, dials in, not crazy on the scale of beer anymore, but, you know, hovering around 10% alcohol, 100 plus IBUs, and we say 120 on the bottle. 124. Yeah, that's what it says. That's right. We all know that the human palate doesn't taste anything over 100 anyways, but, you know, it's a pissing match. That's what it becomes. And yeah, we really got that one. We got that one dialed in really nice. Well, the other, you've got a sophisticated palate, and to notice that percentage. The other thing of a brewery, again, our size, you know, again, mid-90s brewery startup, reaching that 50,000, you know, barrel capacity per year. We're in about 10 states. So, I mean, additions to the brew house, canning, a canning line, we can, Sidekick, Outlook. We'll start to can a number of new beers this year as we actually get a new canning line. But like everybody else, I mean, the QC, QA, the quality assurance, quality control area is what we have the ability to do as a brewery that's been around for a little while and has a little bit of money behind it, is we're able to really make sure that the quality is halfway where we want it, and then some. and also to dial in things like ABV and IBUs and make sure that we're actually not just kind of pulling those numbers not out of the air, but not as scientific as we could be. So Reverlry Imperial Red, huge beer for us. I was talking to our head brewmaster on the way over here, asking him a couple questions about the beer, and he was just telling me that our grain silo isn't massive for a brewery, so we empty the whole sucker every time we fill 2 fermenters, which is kind of just a nuts thing to do. I think it's like 5,000 pounds of base malt just to get us going for 360 barrels of beer for 200,000 barrel fermenters of beer. So it's a ton of grain, and that's just the base malt, right? Just to get some alcohol involved, just to get things going, and then we throw in a ton of caramel malt, a ton of Munich malt, a little bit of just like black malt, not supercharged, but black malt, just to give us that reddish color, that reddish hue you want, which is nice. And then it's pretty much a 3-hop beer as well. Also same, 3 hops on bittering, 3 hops on dry hopping. Columbus, which people have heard about a decent amount. It's pretty much a bittering hop. Been around since 2000 essentially. Palisade and Zythos are 2 kind of quasi-newish ones. Palisade's a big aroma hop. Zythos is a blend hop, actually. It's kind of cool. It's been genetically, well, not genetic, I don't want to make it sound like a GMO sort of thing, but it's been like bred to be like equally, helpful in both aromatic and bittering qualities. You get a lot of the aromatics out of it, though. So I think in general, you're just getting a ton of pine out of all that hop regimen, and then that malt base is just nuts. It takes a lot of malt to make 10% alcohol, 9.9% alcohol. So I think it's a delicious beer. Comes out in the wintertime typically. We're a little late in the game to get it, but I don't feel like we've by late in the game I mean like we're like a month late. So again, this is another one that it's just entering the state of Missouri as of right now, and I think we're tasting it right at its peak. So I think it's really nice. So that is Revelry.